Welcome to our channel. We hope you enjoy your time with us. Whenever she found herself alone, Sophia sought solace in Arthur. The frequent business trips that Jacob took only intensified the loneliness of their home, casting a shadow over each passing day. To Sophia, Arthur had become more than just an adorable pet. His presence, his playful antics, and his comforting demeanor provided her with an escape from her solitude. Evenings, particularly when Jacob was away, were spent in the company of Arthur, who seemed to patrol the house as if he were her guardian. Although Sophia initially dismissed his peculiar behavior as typical of dogs, she began to sense that there was something deeper to his actions. One day, when a friend of Sophia's visited, Arthur's demeanor shifted dramatically. Normally friendly and calm, he suddenly began to growl and show his teeth as the man entered. Confused, Sophia felt a wave of tension wash over her, unable to comprehend her dog's reaction. Her friend, however, found the situation amusing and laughed, while Sophia remained fixated on Arthur, whose eyes had narrowed as if he sensed a threat. Though Arthur was undeniably a sweet and lovable dog, to Sophia, he increasingly embodied the role of a protector, warding off the loneliness that often enveloped her when Jacob was away. Each day that Jacob spent outside the home brought a delicate balance between her feelings of isolation and the companionship of Arthur. His instinctive protectiveness suggested a bond that transcended the typical pet-owner relationship. One weekend, Sophia decided to treat herself to a morning coffee. Before she left, she made sure that Arthur was comfortable. Having spent nearly every moment with him, she felt a slight urge to enjoy some time apart. After being alone for a brief period, she stepped outside the house momentarily. Upon her return, she observed something unusual. The door was ajar. Arthur was positioned alone in the kitchen, his intense gaze seemingly fixed on everything within the room. Sophia approached him, feeling a slight unease, yet Arthur appeared to be acutely aware of something beyond her perception. From a distance, she noticed that Arthur was being treated with greater care than usual, particularly in the presence of men. She couldn't shake the feeling that his gaze was unusually penetrating. It was intriguing how a seemingly innocent dog could discern that a man approaching was a potential threat, but Arthur seemed to possess an innate understanding of such matters. He not only provided protection but also maintained vigilant observation. Sophia began to pay closer attention to the underlying reasons for Arthur's behavior. When Jacob returned home, he was met with Arthur's barking, a behavior he typically exhibited before entering the house. Arthur sensed Jacob's presence even before he laid eyes on him, remaining calm until he was in view. However, once Jacob was inside, Arthur's protective instincts became even more pronounced. Later that day, Arthur appeared restless, eager to observe the people surrounding Sophia. She pondered what specifically captured his attention, as she began to notice the quickening of Arthur's movements in response to approaching footsteps. Sophia attempted to comprehend the nature of the seemingly adorable dog, Arthur. His eyes, however, appeared cold and vigilant, resembling more the demeanor of a guard or a supervisor than that of a typical cute pet. While Sophia believed she was gaining insights from observing Arthur, she harbored doubts about whether he was merely an innocent dog or something more enigmatic. As she pondered the significance of Arthur's unusual gaze and behavior, she found herself increasingly astonished by what he might be concealing. Arthur had noticeably changed since Jacob's absence, and although Sophia was aware of this transformation, she required additional time to fully grasp its implications. In recent days, she had felt a growing restlessness within the confines of her home. Arthur's behavior had become increasingly peculiar, yet the emotions she experienced overshadowed these actions. It felt as though she was under constant scrutiny, with Arthur seemingly aware of her every movement, observing her with an intensity that surpassed that of an ordinary dog. Sophia closely monitored Arthur's actions, caught in a blend of curiosity and trepidation. His strangeness was particularly pronounced at night. On one such evening, with Jacob away once more, she found herself alone with Arthur after dinner, deciding to watch a film. However, the film failed to distract her from the oppressive silence of the night, which was only interrupted by Arthur's presence. He stood by the door, but this time, something felt amiss. It was as if an unseen entity lingered nearby, though she could perceive no one. Fearful of opening the door, she contemplated the possibility of something else being present. Despite Arthur's company, the solitude and the unsettling atmosphere weighed heavily on her. She sensed that he was observing her every moment, but she could not determine whether this was due to his canine nature or something more profound. As she scanned her surroundings, she remained unable to find a definitive answer to her growing unease. She began to contemplate the notion that everything was interconnected. Arthur resembled a silent guardian during the night. Before retiring to bed, she would cast her gaze around each room, meticulously examining every door, window, and shadowy corner, as they all seemed to harbor potential threats. AWA sensed a profound trust in Arthur's protective presence. Jacob's impending return from his business trip stirred a sense of unease within him, amplifying the emotional void he felt. Arthur maintained a serene demeanor whenever he was at Jacob's residence, yet that night, as Sophia reflected on home, she confronted a sensation that someone was contemplating her deeply. This inner emptiness heightened her yearning for companionship. She began to believe that her experiences would differ with someone unknown to her, a desire she had long suppressed but which had recently resurfaced. Sophia found herself momentarily bewildered by a message she received, questioning who could possibly claim to know everything about her. Arthur's watchful gaze seemed to encompass all, yet this felt different. The message resonated with a sense of familiarity, evoking memories of Arthur's perceptive nature. She pondered whether she had misinterpreted the intent behind the message, considering it might be a jest or something else entirely. Nevertheless, the message struck a chord within her, prompting her to take it seriously. The strangeness of the situation weighed heavily on her mind. She could not identify the sender, and the emotional upheaval it caused was disconcerting. Was Arthur merely an endearing dog, or did he represent something more profound? The message raised more questions than it answered, leaving Sophia in a state of confusion. It seemed that the message transcended the notion of a simple, charming dog. Perhaps Arthur held a secret. As she endeavored to decipher the meaning behind the message, the emotional void within her began to clash with a deeply buried desire. Was there something beyond the charming facade of the dog that Arthur understood? Sophia felt as though the cute dog was observing her every move, while simultaneously grappling with the subconscious awareness of another presence, something that she felt was missing. Sophia seamlessly blended into the emptiness within her, questioning the identity of the person who had become intertwined with her existence and the broader world. Arthur's discerning gaze scrutinized the situation, contemplating the implications of the message he had received. In this moment, Sophia hoped fervently that all was well at home, as a sense of unease began to unravel the security she once felt. The message only served to strengthen her suspicion that Arthur possessed more depth than merely being an endearing dog. As time passed, the void within Sophia deepened in Jacob's absence, and the loneliness she experienced intensified her desire for connection. The message from the unknown number lingered in her thoughts, while Arthur's vigilant presence prompted her to question her own feelings increasingly. This day compelled Sophia to examine Arthur's behavior more closely. Was it mere coincidence, or did the charming dog truly possess insight? One evening, Sophia encountered Charlie, an old friend and repairman who lived nearby. Although their relationship was relatively new, she found warmth in their conversations. Charlie appeared somewhat anxious about his work and spoke incessantly, yet Sophia remained oblivious to his demeanor, still feeling a connection with him. It was the first time Arthur had seen Charlie, and he remained unusually quiet, his eyes tracking every movement without uttering a sound. As was customary, Sophia brought Arthur along and continued her conversation with Charlie. Wishing to spend the evening alone, she decided to learn more about Charlie. After some time, she invited him to her home. Arthur's behavior towards Charlie was peculiar, differing from his usual interactions with others. Initially, he observed Charlie with a calm and watchful demeanor, which Sophia attributed to the dog's natural caution around strangers. However, she gradually sensed that something was amiss. Arthur's scrutiny of Charlie's actions grew more intense, and the atmosphere shifted as the night progressed. Arthur abruptly rose, stealthily approaching Charlie while emitting a guttural, menacing growl and bark. The ferocity of the growl was matched by the intensity of his expression, steeped in dark rage. Charlie, taken aback, stepped back in shock, his gaze fixed on Arthur. Sophia, witnessing this sudden shift in the dog's demeanor, felt alarmed. Arthur's behavior was perplexing. He had never exhibited such aggression towards anyone before. In an attempt to calm him, Sophia reached out, but Arthur had already lost control. Without warning, he lunged at Charlie, leaving Sophia with no choice but to confine the dog securely in a room, where Arthur continued to bark from within. A heavy silence enveloped the space between Sophia and Charlie as she struggled to comprehend the unfolding situation. What did Arthur's reaction signify? Charlie perceived the atmosphere as strange, his expression a blend of surprise and fear. A sense of restlessness washed over Sophia, drawing her emotional focus toward Charlie, while a feeling of unsafety began to settle in. She realized that Arthur's warning was not unfounded. Charlie decided it was time to leave, but Sophia, despite her better judgment, felt an inexplicable fear at the thought of being alone that night. Curiously, she did not feel entirely alone in the house, a sensation she was beginning to accept. After Arthur was confined, she sensed his presence watching her. Throughout the night, she could not shake the feeling that Arthur was observing her from somewhere. As she attempted to sleep, something unusual occurred. Arthur, who had never behaved this way before, positioned himself by the door and growled silently until dawn, indicating that something was amiss. She had hoped for normalcy after Charlie's departure, but that night proved otherwise. She became aware that she was not alone in the house, sensing that something else was observing her. As she scanned the room with her eyes, Sophia noticed Arthur peering through the door once more, an unusual calmness about him, as if he were concentrating on something specific. In that instant, Sophia understood that the dog's vigilance extended beyond mere protection. Arthur was conveying a message with each of his movements, though she could not decipher it. A strong feeling washed over her that something within the house was under scrutiny. In recent days, Sophia had begun to pay closer attention to Arthur's behavior. When Charlie had entered the house, the dog's fierce demeanor had seemed to signal that something was amiss. Although Arthur had not harmed her, there was a palpable threat reflected in his gaze, suggesting that his instincts were alerting her to something deeper. This prompted Sophia to resolve to monitor Arthur's every action closely. Was this man truly someone she recognized, or merely a stranger? Furthermore, why was Arthur's reaction so pronounced? Another thought crossed Sophia's mind: Jacob. It had been weeks since her husband had returned home. During this time, Jacob had developed a habit of leaving his phone unattended in the mornings before departing for work, and then he had suddenly disappeared. Sophia had attempted to reach out, but each call resulted in silence. It was highly unusual for him to be absent for such an extended period without any communication. There had been no messages or phone calls from her husband, and the lack of contact was unsettling. Additionally, she had noticed unusual transactions in Jacob's bank accounts, leading her to believe that these occurrences could not simply be coincidental. Her husband would not engage in such behavior. One evening, while preparing dinner in the kitchen, something drew her attention. Charlie had exited the house not long before, yet as she sat at the kitchen table, an object fell to the floor, as if time had momentarily halted. Sophia picked up the watch from the ground and paused, momentarily transfixed by the item that belonged to her husband. Jacob had slipped from Charlie's jacket pocket, causing her heart to race. She recalled how well that watch complemented Charlie, yet it had not been sufficient to obscure the truth. Now, another watch and yet another coincidence emerged. Was everything interconnected, or was there more to uncover regarding her husband's disappearance? Sophia felt a mix of fear and suspicion as she recognized the connections. There had to be a link between Arthur's reactions and her husband's vanishing. She resolved to scrutinize this revelation closely. That night, she was convinced that Arthur's eyes concealed something significant. For weeks, Sophia had been attempting to decipher Arthur's responses, but the right explanation eluded her, particularly regarding his behavior when her new boyfriend, Jacob, was around. Each day, Arthur's attempts to approach Jacob seemed increasingly perplexing, as if he were trying to shield him. Initially, Sophia had dismissed it as the affectionate nature of a loyal dog, yet as time passed, her suspicions grew. Was Arthur merely acting on instinct, or was he aware of something more? Jacob's absence prompted Sophia to question everything. In that moment of realization that Jacob was not home, Arthur's behavior became even more enigmatic. Was Jacob genuinely away on business, or was this all a manifestation of some concealed truth about her missing husband? One night, as Sophia drifted into a deep slumber, she dreamt of a silhouette, Jacob, screaming and shouting. The dream left a profound impact on her. In it, Arthur also appeared, standing vigil at her room's door, watching the silhouette pace anxiously within. Awakening from the dream, Sophia felt a chill run through her. It seemed as though Arthur was trying to convey a message. The following morning, her concern deepened. She commenced her examination of the surroundings of the house. Upon entering the garden, she observed that Arthur remained fixated on a specific spot at the base of an ancient tree. She approached him swiftly to investigate the area where the small dog was focused, noticing that the ground appeared altered. The location that had captured Arthur's attention piqued Sophia's curiosity. Realizing that something was amiss, he began to excavate the soil. As he dug deeper, he uncovered a startling revelation. Numerous items, including clothing and some old belongings of Jacob, were buried there. The most shocking aspect was that these objects had been interred over time, as Jacob had passed away some time ago. At that moment, their eyes widened in fear, and Arthur's reactions confirmed that her husband had indeed vanished. Even more distressing was the realization that Arthur had been aware of this all along. Sophia finally uncovered the truth that Arthur had concealed for years. Jacob's disappearance was far more complex than a mere incident. With each step and emotional shift, Arthur had endeavored to shield Sophia from the truth. Now, Sophia would be haunted by the memories of that night, coming to understand the depth of Arthur's involvement in the events that transpired. She was no longer merely searching for a missing husband, but also for a life that had slipped away. This narrative concludes here. If you find this story meaningful and believe it imparts a valuable lesson, kindly like and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next videos.